Welcome back to Knowledge is Kings, guys. I am Kings, and today's project is going to be made by my oldest son, who has never made anything in my shop before and has very limited tool experience, besides using an impact and a drill, which ironically won't be used on this project. He is making this project for his girlfriend for Christmas, so I'm not supposed to help, but I needed to a couple of times. Now, I told him to throw himself under her Christmas tree and tell her it's because he's a gift, and he said his girlfriend doesn't like it when he lies, so he'll be making this for her instead. Let's get started. Actually, before we do, I should say his inspiration from this project came from another YouTuber called Newton Makes. I'm not sure if it was his original idea, but that's where my son got the idea. Now let's get to it. So to get started, he's going to be milling up wood for the ribbons so the glue can set up on those while he makes the box itself. He is ripping cherry and maple for the ribbons. Once he has them ripped down, he takes them over to the bandsaw to resaw them into thinner strips. Ladies and gentlemen, the video you are about to see has not been adjusted in any way. This is in real time. Yeah, that's how slow he was actually going. Seriously though, with any tool, especially if it's your first time using it, move at a pace that you feel comfortable with. Even if people are watching, never be pressured into using a tool in a way that makes you uncomfortable. If you are uncomfortable, you have a better chance of getting injured. Start off pushing through slowly and increase your speed when you feel comfortable. Once he has the first piece cut, he takes it over to the joiner to smooth the cut face, so when he sends it through the planer later, he has a flat surface to reference. Then it's back to the bandsaw to resaw the other two pieces and resaw the cherry board down to the size as well. If you have never used a bandsaw, you may be wondering why he doesn't use the rip fence so the cut will be straight. Because you can't. When you resaw on the bandsaw, the wood cannot go through straight. It needs to be at an angle. You may be wondering, why does it need to go through at an angle to make a straight cut? And I would tell you, but I don't know. It probably has something to do with physics or something. They do make a resaw guide though that comes to a point, so it holds the piece perpendicular to the blade, but still allows you to move the piece at whatever angle you need to, but I don't have one. Once he has the pieces he needs, he sends them through a small planer to get them smooth on the cut side and to get them to the proper thickness. He's using this small planer, which isn't very good, because the pieces were short and I couldn't remember the minimum board length for my big planer. This planer has 2 or 3 straight blades. So once he gets the wood down to 3/16 of an inch thick for the cherry, it started to chip big chunks off the ends. So he takes all the boards over to the miter saw to clean up the edges. Then it's time for glue up. He carefully makes the clamps straight with each other. Not sure why he's being so meticulous with the clamps. Wish he could be that meticulous with his chores. Anyway, he glues the boards together with a glue roller. As he should, he clamps the boards together, starting with the center clamps and working outwards. Back at the table saw, he sets the fence to rip down some black walnut for the box itself. And I guess that deserves victory dance. Once he has it ripped to size, he planes one face smooth on the joiner. Then takes it to the bandsaw to resaw it in half so he doesn't waste a whole piece of wood when he only needs a half of an inch. Really, this should be done with a wider blade, as it would allow for a smoother cut, and resawing on a small blade like this will shorten its lifespan, but I was too lazy to change out the blade. Then it's over to the planer. This board is long enough so we can use my big planer, which has over 400 individual cutters, so it produces a much finer finish cut. He sets the thickness for the thickness he cut it to, or at least he tried to cut it to, and then he planes it down to his final half-inch desired. He makes sure to put the smooth side that he made on the joiner down as he sends it through the planer. At the table saw, he needs to switch the blade over to a dado stack. He sets it to a half-inch thick, the same as the thickness of his box. He's using aluminum blocks to set the height of the blade. We take a moment to think about the power of the noble table saw. Yeah, okay. Take a moment to notice where his hands are pushing the board. It's pushing the wood through, but also towards the blade. Always push towards the fence. It was at this moment he knew he messed up. To fix this, he just made the piece a little smaller. He put the Gesso anti-kickback wheels out to make sure he doesn't make that mistake again. The wheels not only stop kickback, but also keeps the board pressed against the fence. The reason I didn't have him use this in the first place is because few table saws have them, and everyone who uses a table saw needs to get used to doing without all the fancy equipment. They are very nice, but not needed if you're just a DIYer. The little wheel setup is about $250, I think, so it's kind of pricey for a helping hand. I use them from time to time, but not for every cut. So he needs to get used to using the table saw without them. Here, however, he was nervous about ruining it again, so he's using them. Once he has a rabbet cut on both sides, he's ready to cut the sides to length. He made a cut on each end at 45 degrees and then sets a stop block to cut each side to the right length. The first piece he did correctly, but pay attention to the second attempt. Did you see what happened there? I'll zoom in. For whatever reason, he slammed the piece into the stop block, causing it to move. This is actually pretty common, but when you are using a stop block, it is good practice to just touch the board into it, not slam it. 1, you don't want to accidentally move the block, and 2, if you have a bevel cut like this, you don't want to damage the point. Once he was finished cutting all the pieces for the sides, it was time for the glue up. He tapes the long points of the bevels together with painter's tape, and he puts the same tape at the short point of all the bevels to help with cleaning up glue squeeze out on the inside. The extra scrap piece of wood that he wipes his brush on is just to get rid of excess glue when he puts too much in the joints. He needs a good amount, but not too much where it's going to be a ton of squeeze out everywhere. Once the sides are taped together, he adds a piece to the top and bottom that he milled up the same way as the sides, but this piece is only 1/4 inch thick. He added a little extra glue around the piece and then immediately sands it to allow sanding dust to mix with the glue and fill in any small gaps in between the lid and the sides. He will finish sanding it later. Once the glue was set up, it was time for him to cut the lid free. So he set the blade height to just taller than 1/2 inch and made the first 2 passes. He was worried about the subsequent pass causing the gap to close up on him, so he put an aluminum spacer in the first cut, taped it in, and made a 3rd pass. Then, for some reason, he put in some small cut-off pieces as spacers this time, but he felt too uncomfortable to make the final pass, so he asked me to do it. So I made the last cut, breaking the lid free. Then it was time for a break. For me, not for him. He continued on, gluing in some really thin pieces of maple that will keep the top of the box in line with the sides. He glues these in with just a CA glue and accelerant. The line he has drawn on each piece is just below the edge of the box as a reminder not to put glue higher than that. The last piece he cut a little too tight, so he had me end my break early, rush over, and squeeze it in just in time. Boy, he really doesn't pay me enough for all this work I have to do on his project. I tried to scrape out the little bit of squeeze out on the bottom, but it was too late. It had hardened. He took care of that with a chisel later. The inside is getting felt, so it didn't need to be super perfect. He used a file to lightly bevel the edges so the lid would slip on nicely without needing too much time to try to line it up. This took a while, and it's kind of like watching paint dry, so let's skip ahead. He put it all together, and it was time to sand through all the grits of sandpaper on the outside, but this is kind of like watching paint. Oh, I already did that analogy. But you know my motto, what's worse than sanding a project? Nothing. But watching someone sand is pretty close. Now it's time to work on the blank he glued together earlier. After taking out the clamps, he just put a straight edge on each side and then ripped off strips that I think were 1/8 inch thick, maybe a little thicker. After each rip, he moved the fence over to make another rip. He took those strips and cut them on the miter saw and then glued him onto his project with the CA glue again. Nice. He had the side strips overhang just a bit and then sanded them down to the right height. You know, occasionally you'll hear someone say they actually like sanding. Yeah, stay away from those people. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. And skip, skippity, skip, skip. Once he was done with the flat ribbon, he took the second blank he made and glued on the patterns he got from Newton Makes YouTube channel. He put blue painter's tape on first before spraying with glue so he wouldn't have to clean off glue residue later. Then it's off to the scroll saw to make the center cuts of the oval ribbons. I didn't have a scroll saw, so I bought one for this project. This means that I had no advice to give him on how to use it. He tried a few times and couldn't quite make the turn, so he asked me to try. I was able to do it without much trouble, but I couldn't really advise him on how to make it work for him other than to tell him to push into the blade even when turning. That was the best I could do, but it seemed to work. He did a lot better on his second attempt. When cutting patterns on paper like this, don't cut the line as I did and as he does as well. Leave the line so you have a reference to sand to. Yeah, I need to build a stand for this scroll saw so it doesn't move all around. That will have to be a future project. With the inside of the ovals cut, it's easiest to sand them now while they are attached to a big piece to hold onto. He does that on the spindle sander. Then it's over to the bandsaw to cut the ovals and the other ribbon pieces out. And back to the sanding. I'm glad I'm not doing this project. Once he has made 5 oval pieces and 4 curved ribbon pieces and has them all sanded, he takes the 4 ribbon pieces to the belt sander to make a 90-degree cut on one end. These cuts are not 45 degrees relative to the side of the edges of the ribbon because it would cause the piece to hang way over one side of the box. The belt sander is the safest way to make this cut. You can't see me, but I did air quotes on the word cut. Now, before attaching any other ribbon pieces, he thought it would be a good idea to finish everything first, as it would be very hard to do this after the ribbons were on. This actually didn't work out that well, as later the glue didn't want to stick to the finish. The finish is Rubio Monocoat. He just rubs some on and then rubs off as much as possible after a couple minutes. He covers all the ribbons as well, even though I don't show it here. He then remembered he wanted to cut angles into the other ends of the curved ribbon pieces at the bandsaw. He doesn't make any marks for the cuts, so it looks more like a hand-cut ribbon end. He glued those pieces in with the CA glue and then proceeded to glue in the round ribbon pieces, or oval. This was time-consuming because of the finish. He had to sand some away, but only where the glue was going to go. But as they are round, they don't touch in a lot of places, so he was trying to sand very small areas. But eventually he got it. Then he wraps the top of the bottom box with painter's tape for the last part so that he won't get glue all over the areas he doesn't want it on. Then he applies color matched glue. That glue is color matched to the flocking he'll be spraying on in a second. Once the glue is on and still wet, he coats it in flocking powder for a fine felt finish. I told him that you can't use too much flocking because you can always reuse whatever doesn't stick. I should have been more clear and said to try to at least get some of the flocking into the project itself and not everywhere else. Oh well, he'll have that on these big jobs. Once he let that dry and cleaned it up a bit, the project was complete. This is actually a pretty big project for a new woodworker, taking him about 3 days to complete. But as you can see, even a novice can do it. It was also really fun for me to have one of my boys building something, and I got to be the one to teach him how to do it the right way, my way. I think he knows I liked it, and he wanted to not only make something for his girl, but also score a few brownie points with Dad so close to Christmas. Well, the joke's on him. I don't like brownies. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up as it really helps out the channel, and subscribe so you can be entered into our current giveaway. Details are in the description. Have a blessed Christmas, and I'll see you in the next one. Been with him 15 years and he never made something special for me. Oh, I like that.